Hello there, and welcome to Sleepy Depths. Tonight, we're taking a peaceful journey into the remarkable world of clownfish. Beneath the warm waters of the Indian and Pacific Oceans lives one of the most recognizable fish on Earth. Millions of people know it as Nemo, but its real life is even more fascinating than fiction. Hidden among the waving tentacles of sea anemones, clownfish spend their entire lives in one of the ocean's most extraordinary partnerships. They raise families, defend tiny territories, communicate through sound, and even change sex when nature requires it. Over the next 2 hours, we'll slowly explore 100 fascinating facts about these incredible little fish, discovering how evolution shaped one of the most unique lives anywhere beneath the sea. So, make yourself comfortable. Let your breathing slow. Let the sounds of the ocean replace the sounds of the day. And together, let's drift into the peaceful world of clownfish. Let's begin. Perhaps the most surprising thing about clownfish is that there is not just one kind of them. Although many people picture the familiar orange fish with 3 white stripes, scientists have identified 28 different species living across the warm waters of the Indian and Pacific Oceans. Some are bright orange, while others are deep crimson, chocolate brown, or almost completely black. A few wear only a single white stripe, while others display delicate patterns that seem painted by hand. Each species has found its own place among the coral reefs, adapting over millions of years to slightly different environments, different anemones, and different ways of life. Yet despite these differences, every clownfish shares one extraordinary characteristic. Every one of them depends on a partnership that seems almost impossible when you first hear about it. They spend their entire lives surrounded by the waving tentacles of sea anemones, animals equipped with thousands of microscopic stinging cells capable of paralyzing small fish in an instant. For nearly every other creature in the ocean, brushing against those tentacles would be a fatal mistake. For a clownfish, it is simply home. That partnership has fascinated scientists for decades because it appears to break one of nature's simplest rules. Dangerous animals are usually avoided. Clownfish do the exact opposite. They swim directly toward danger, disappearing into the forest of tentacles as comfortably as a bird returning to its nest. Watching one for the first time almost feels like witnessing a magic trick. The fish glides effortlessly through a living trap that would kill almost anything else of its size. For many years, researchers wondered whether clownfish were simply immune to the stings. The answer, it turns out, is far more subtle. Like all fish, clownfish are covered by a thin layer of protective mucus, but theirs is chemically unusual. Rather than triggering the anemone's stinging cells, the coating seems to convince the anemone that the fish is harmless, or perhaps even part of itself. Scientists are still investigating exactly how this remarkable disguise works. And although several theories exist, the complete explanation remains one of the ocean's quiet mysteries. Even more remarkable is the way a young clownfish approaches an unfamiliar anemone for the very first time. It does not rush in carelessly. Instead, it behaves with extraordinary patience. The fish gently brushes against a single tentacle, then quickly retreats. A few moments later, it returns, touching another tentacle for only an instant before backing away once more. Little by little, over the course of several hours, these cautious introductions continue until eventually the clownfish moves freely among the tentacles without triggering a single sting. It is almost as though two strangers are learning to trust one another. Once accepted, the relationship becomes beneficial for both partners. The clownfish gains a safe refuge from predators that would never dare swim into the anemone's poisonous embrace. The anemone, meanwhile, receives something equally valuable. As the fish darts through the tentacles each day, it improves the circulation of water around its host, bringing fresh oxygen while carrying away waste. The clownfish also removes parasites, cleans debris from the tentacles, and even leaves behind nutrients that help support the anemone itself. Nature is filled with partnerships, but few are quite so elegant. Every now and then, the clownfish ventures only a short distance from its home to search for food. It never travels very far. Unlike many reef fish that wander across wide territories, clownfish are surprisingly devoted to a single location. Some individuals spend their entire adult lives within only a few meters of the same anemone. If you return to the exact same reef year after year, there is a good chance you would find the very same fish still living exactly where you left it. There is something strangely comforting about that kind of life. While the ocean around them is constantly changing with tides, currents, storms, and migrating animals, the clownfish remains rooted to one familiar place. Its world is not measured in miles, but in inches. Every nearby coral branch, every rock, every crevice becomes familiar over time. The reef, enormous from a human perspective, becomes a tiny neighborhood viewed through the eyes of a fish no longer than your hand. That small neighborhood, however, is far from quiet. Coral reefs are among the busiest ecosystems on Earth. Beneath the gentle movement of the waves lies an endless rhythm of life. Tiny shrimp snap their claws with enough force to create miniature shockwaves. Parrotfish scrape algae from coral with sounds that echo softly through the water. Countless schools of fish weave through shafts of sunlight that... Exactly because life is concentrated within such a small corner of the reef, every detail matters. A change in the current, the arrival of a new neighbor, or the disappearance of a familiar shadow can transform an ordinary day into one filled with small but important decisions. Although clownfish appear calm, they are constantly observing the world around them. Their eyes follow movement beyond the tentacles while their remarkable sense of smell quietly gathers invisible information carried through the water. Water carries an astonishing amount of information. Every passing fish, every patch of coral, and every drifting piece of algae leaves behind tiny chemical traces that remain suspended in the sea. While the ocean may appear silent and empty to us, a clownfish experiences it as a landscape rich with invisible signals that reveal where food can be found, which animals have recently passed nearby, and whether danger may be approaching long before it comes into view. These remarkable senses become especially important during the earliest stage of a clownfish's life. Every adult begins as an egg no larger than a grain of rice, carefully attached to a smooth rock beside the shelter of its host anemone. Hundreds of tiny orange eggs develop together, gently swaying with every movement of the surrounding water while their father remains close by almost constantly. Throughout the following days, the male devotes himself to protecting the developing eggs. He continuously fans them with his fins to keep fresh oxygen flowing across their surface, carefully removes grains of sand or debris that settle between them, and picks away any damaged or unfertilized eggs before fungus has a chance to spread. It is patient, repetitive work, Yet every gentle movement increases the chances that healthy young fish will soon hatch. As the embryos continue developing, the eggs slowly become more transparent. Near the end of this process, their tiny silver eyes can already be seen through the delicate outer layer, offering a brief glimpse of the young fish before they ever enter the ocean. Then, shortly after sunset, when darkness settles across the reef and many daytime predators have disappeared, the eggs begin to hatch. This timing gives the newly emerged larvae their best chance of survival. Their transparent bodies are almost invisible as they drift away from the reef, carried into the open ocean by the nighttime currents. During the first weeks of life, they become part of the drifting plankton community, feeding on microscopic organisms while avoiding countless predators that hunt creatures of their size. Only a very small number survive this difficult journey, but those that do possess abilities far more impressive than scientists once believed. For many years, researchers assumed that clownfish larvae simply drifted wherever the currents carried them. Careful studies have revealed something far more remarkable. Even at only a few weeks old, these tiny fish begin swimming with surprising strength while using both smell and sound to search for the coral reef where they will eventually settle. Chemical signals released by coral, seagrass, and countless reef organisms create an invisible trail through the water, allowing the young fish to navigate toward a place they have never seen before. Exactly because life is concentrated within such a small corner of the reef, every detail matters. A change in the current, the arrival of a new neighbor, or the disappearance of a familiar shadow can transform an ordinary day into one filled with small but important decisions. Although clownfish appear calm, they are constantly observing the world around them. Their eyes follow movement beyond the tentacles while their remarkable sense of smell quietly gathers invisible information carried through the water. Water carries an astonishing amount of information. Every passing fish, every patch of coral, and every drifting piece of algae leaves behind tiny chemical traces that remain suspended in the sea. While the ocean may appear silent and empty to us, a clownfish experiences it as a landscape rich with invisible signals that reveal where food can be found, which animals have recently passed nearby, and whether danger may be approaching long before it comes into view. These remarkable senses become especially important during the earliest stage of a clownfish's life. Every adult begins as an egg no larger than a grain of rice, carefully attached to a smooth rock beside the shelter of its host anemone. Hundreds of tiny orange eggs develop together, gently swaying with every movement of the surrounding water while their father remains close by almost constantly. Throughout the following days, the male devotes himself to protecting the developing eggs. He continuously fans them with his fins to keep fresh oxygen flowing across their surface, carefully removes grains of sand or debris that settle between them, and picks away any damaged or unfertilized eggs before fungus has a chance to spread. It is patient, repetitive work, yet every gentle movement increases the chances that healthy young fish will soon hatch. As the embryos continue developing, the eggs slowly become more transparent. Near the end of this process, their tiny silver eyes can already be seen through the delicate outer layer, offering a brief glimpse of the young fish before they ever enter the ocean. Then, shortly after sunset, when darkness settles across the reef and many daytime predators have disappeared, the eggs begin to hatch. This timing gives the newly emerged larvae their best chance of survival. Their transparent bodies are almost invisible as they drift away from the reef, carried into the open ocean by the nighttime currents. During the first weeks of life, they become part of the drifting plankton community, feeding on microscopic organisms while avoiding countless predators that hunt creatures of their size. Only a very small number survive this difficult journey, but those that do possess abilities far more impressive than scientists once believed. For many years, researchers assumed that clownfish larvae simply drifted wherever the currents carried them. Careful studies have revealed something far more remarkable. Even at only a few weeks old, these tiny fish begin swimming with surprising strength while using both smell and sound to search for the coral reef where they will eventually settle. Chemical signals released by coral, seagrass, and countless reef organisms create an invisible trail through the water, allowing the young fish to navigate toward a place they have never seen before. As the young clownfish grows, the bright white stripes that make the species so recognizable slowly begin to appear. At first, the juvenile looks quite different from the familiar fish most people know, but over the following weeks, its colors become richer. The orange deepens, and the crisp white bands gradually emerge. Those striking patterns are created by specialized cells beneath the skin that reflect light in different ways, producing a contrast so bold that it seems almost painted by hand. Despite their vivid appearance, clownfish spend surprisingly little time swimming through open water. Most adults remain within only a few meters of the same anemone for years, and some may never travel farther than a small living room would seem to us. For an animal living in the vastness of the Pacific Ocean, this tiny territory becomes an entire universe. Every rock, every branch of coral, and every patch of sand is familiar. The fish quickly memorizes the layout of its surroundings, learning exactly where food is most likely to drift by and where predators are most likely to appear. This detailed knowledge of home allows the clownfish to move with remarkable confidence. Short feeding trips take it only a small distance away before it quickly returns to the safety of the anemone. To an outside observer, these journeys may seem repetitive, but each excursion provides another opportunity to gather food while remaining close enough to retreat in an instant if danger appears. Although clownfish rarely travel far, they are anything but silent residents of the reef. They communicate using a surprising variety of sounds that many divers never notice. By grinding small teeth together, they produce soft clicks, pops, and chirping noises that travel efficiently through seawater. These sounds become especially common during social interactions, helping members of the group communicate without constant physical confrontation. Scientists have discovered that dominant fish produce different acoustic patterns from subordinate ones. Even without direct contact, members of the family can gather information about status, confidence, and intention simply by listening. The reef, which often appears peaceful from above, is filled with these tiny conversations happening every moment beneath the surface. Vision also plays an important role in the daily life of a clownfish. Their eyes are adapted to the brilliant light of shallow tropical water, allowing them to detect subtle movement among the corals. Even more remarkable, they can see wavelengths of ultraviolet light that are completely invisible to human eyes. The reef they experience is therefore richer and more detailed than anything we can naturally perceive. filled with patterns and reflections hidden beyond our own vision. Researchers have also found that clownfish possess surprisingly capable memories. Individuals quickly learn the routines of their environment and remember the locations of reliable food sources. They can adapt to changes, solve simple problems in laboratory experiments, and modify their behavior based on previous experience. These discoveries continue to challenge the old assumption that fish simply react through instinct alone. Individual clownfish even display consistent personalities. Some are naturally bold, leaving the anemone more readily to investigate unfamiliar objects or approaching divers. Others remain cautious throughout their lives, venturing only short distances before returning to the safety of the tentacles. These behavioral differences remain stable over time, suggesting that each fish possesses its own characteristic temperament. Divers who regularly visit the same reef sometimes notice another fascinating behavior. A resident clownfish may become noticeably less defensive toward familiar people than toward strangers. While it is impossible to know exactly what the fish perceives, repeated observations suggest that clownfish can distinguish between individual humans based on their appearance and behavior. For such a small animal, this ability is remarkably sophisticated. As evening approaches each day, activity across the reef gradually begins to slow. The brilliant sunlight softens into gentle shades of blue, and many daytime fish disappear into cracks and caves where they will spend the night. The clownfish, however, does not search for a new place to rest. It simply settles deeper among the familiar tentacles of its anemone, remaining within the same protective home that has sheltered it throughout the day. Fish do not close their eyes when they sleep because they have no eyelids. Instead, clownfish enter a quiet resting state in which their movements become slow, their breathing steadies, and their awareness of the outside world decreases. Hidden among the gently swaying tentacles, they conserve energy until the first light of morning once again filters through the clear tropical water. There is something deeply peaceful about this nightly rhythm. The same anemone that protected the fish from predators during the day now becomes its bedroom. The same gentle currents that carried food across the reef now rock the resting fish almost like a cradle. Night after night, year after year, this quiet routine repeats itself beneath the waves, unnoticed by almost everyone except the countless other creatures sharing the reef. The coral reef itself is one of the most extraordinary environments on Earth. Although it covers less than 1% of the ocean floor, it supports nearly a quarter of all known marine species. Scientists often compare coral reefs to tropical rainforests because both ecosystems contain an astonishing concentration of life within a relatively small area. Every crack in the reef, every branch of coral, and every sheltered crevice may be home to dozens of different animals, each playing its own role in a community that has been evolving for millions of years. It is easy to think of coral as colorful underwater rock, but coral is actually made of living animals. Each coral colony consists of thousands of tiny coral polyps, soft-bodied creatures related to sea anemones. These animals slowly build limestone skeletons beneath themselves, and generation after generation continues adding new layers. Over hundreds and even thousands of years, these tiny builders create enormous reef structures that can stretch for hundreds of kilometers across the ocean. Living inside the tissues of these coral animals are microscopic algae known as zooxanthellae. Through photosynthesis, they capture energy from sunlight and provide much of the food the coral needs to survive. In return, the coral offers the algae a safe place to live and access to nutrients. Once again, nature reveals another partnership built on cooperation rather than competition. Sea anemones, although closely related to coral, live a slightly different life. Instead of building large limestone skeletons, they remain soft and flexible, allowing their tentacles to sway gracefully with every passing current. Like coral, many anemones also rely on microscopic algae living inside their tissues, giving them beautiful shades of green, brown, pink, and gold beneath the tropical sun. For the clownfish, this colorful world provides almost everything it needs. Tiny crustaceans drift past with the currents, microscopic plankton floats through the water, and delicate strands of algae grow nearby. Rather than traveling long distances in search of food, the clownfish gathers small meals throughout the day while remaining close to the safety of its home. This settled lifestyle has another advantage. Because the fish spends years within such a small territory, it becomes intimately familiar with every neighboring creature. Certain butterfly fish pass by at almost the same time each morning. Cleaner shrimp establish stations where larger fish arrive to have parasites removed. Small crabs quietly patrol the coral branches, while sea stars slowly cross the sand with movements so gradual they seem almost motionless. Nothing on the reef exists in isolation. Every species depends upon countless others in ways that are often invisible at first glance. A healthy coral colony supports tiny algae. The algae feed the coral. The coral creates shelter for invertebrates. Those invertebrates become food for fish. The fish transport nutrients throughout the reef. Even the waste produced by fish returns valuable nitrogen and phosphorus to the ecosystem, helping support new growth. The clownfish is part of this endless cycle. Although it is best known for its relationship with the sea anemone, its daily activities influence many other organisms around it. As the fish feeds, rests, and moves among the tentacles, nutrients are released that benefit the anemone itself. Scientists have discovered that clownfish may even improve water circulation around their host simply by swimming through the tentacles, helping deliver fresh oxygen while removing waste products. This relationship becomes especially important during periods of environmental stress. When ocean temperatures remain unusually high for long periods, both coral and sea anemones can experience a phenomenon known as bleaching. The microscopic algae living inside their tissues are expelled, causing the animals to lose much of their color and, more importantly, an important source of energy. A healthy reef filled with brilliant reds, greens, and golds can slowly fade into pale shades of white. Bleaching does not always mean immediate death. If temperatures return to normal quickly enough, the algae may return and recovery can begin. However, prolonged heat places enormous strain on these delicate ecosystems. Because clownfish depend so completely on healthy anemones, they too are affected whenever their homes begin to struggle. Researchers studying bleached anemones have noticed something encouraging. Those that continue hosting clownfish often recover more successfully than those left without their tiny companions. The fish, simply by continuing their ordinary routines, appear to increase oxygen flow around the anemone and provide valuable nutrients that support recovery. It is a quiet reminder that partnerships in nature often become most important during difficult times. Even predators play an essential role within this underwater community. Large groupers, moray eels, reef sharks, and countless other hunters patrol the reef each day, helping maintain balance among the many different species. Without predators, populations could grow beyond what the reef could support, placing enormous pressure on coral and other fragile organisms. The clownfish understands this danger instinctively. Rarely does it venture farther from the anemone than necessary. A quick search for drifting food is followed by an equally quick return to the shelter of the tentacles. From a human perspective, this cautious lifestyle may seem repetitive, but over millions of years it has proven remarkably successful. Sometimes survival depends not on exploring farther, but on knowing exactly where home is and never straying too far from it. For all its apparent tranquility, the reef is constantly changing. Ocean currents shift with the seasons, storms reshape coral formations, and generations of fish come and go. Yet many clownfish spend their entire adult lives in the same anemone, watching these gradual changes unfold from a remarkably small corner of the ocean. Their world may be limited in size, but it is endlessly rich in detail. One of the greatest challenges facing clownfish today is something they cannot see. As human activity releases increasing amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, the ocean absorbs a large portion of it. This process slowly changes the chemistry of seawater, making it slightly more acidic. Although the change seems small, marine animals that rely on delicate chemical signals can be surprisingly sensitive to it. Experiments have shown that young clownfish raised in more acidic water sometimes struggle to interpret smells correctly. Instead of avoiding the scent of predators, some individuals become confused or even swim toward danger. For a fish whose survival depends on recognizing chemical information carried by the current, this represents a profound disruption. It is as though an invisible map of the world has suddenly become blurred. Rising temperatures create additional challenges. Clownfish are tropical animals, but even they have limits. Water that remains only a few degrees warmer than normal for extended periods can reduce reproductive success, weaken immune function, and place considerable stress on both the fish and the anemones they depend upon. The reef is a finely balanced system, and even subtle changes can ripple through the entire community. Fortunately, many scientists, conservationists, and local communities are working to protect these remarkable ecosystems. Around the world, marine protected areas have been established where fishing and collecting are carefully limited. Within these protected waters, reefs often recover more successfully, supporting healthier coral, larger fish populations, and greater numbers of sea anemones. Because clownfish breed readily in captivity, another important conservation success has emerged over the past few decades. Today, most clownfish sold for home aquariums are no longer collected from wild reefs. Instead, they are raised by professional breeders, reducing pressure on natural populations while allowing people to appreciate these beautiful animals without removing them from the ocean. Interestingly, clownfish were among the first marine fish to be bred successfully on a commercial scale. Their willingness to reproduce in captivity helped scientists develop techniques that are now used to raise many other marine species. Knowledge gained from one familiar little fish has contributed to broader efforts in marine conservation and sustainable aquaculture. Clownfish have also become valuable subjects for scientific research far beyond coral reefs. Because they undergo a natural and predictable change of sex, researchers have studied them to better understand how hormones, genes, and social interactions influence development in vertebrates. Their unique biology continues to answer questions that extend well beyond marine science. Modern genetic research has revealed even more surprises. Scientists have sequenced the entire clownfish genome, providing an incredibly detailed blueprint of the species. This information allows researchers to investigate how clownfish evolved their partnership with sea anemones, how they recognize chemical signals, and how their remarkable social system developed over millions of years. Even after decades of study, one mystery remains only partially solved. No scientist can yet explain exactly why a sea anemone chooses not to fire its microscopic stinging cells when touched by a clownfish. The fish's protective mucus clearly plays an important role, and gradual acclimation is also essential. But the precise biological mechanism continues to be investigated. It is a reminder that nature still keeps some of its most fascinating secrets, even within one of the world's most recognizable animals. Evolutionary evidence suggests that the partnership between clownfish and sea anemones began at least 10 million years ago. Over that immense span of time, both species gradually adapted to one another, refining a relationship so specialized that neither now lives quite the same life without the other. Few partnerships in the natural world demonstrate mutual dependence so beautifully. When people think of clownfish today, many immediately picture a small orange fish searching for its family across the ocean. That story introduced millions of children to marine life, inspiring curiosity about coral reefs and the creatures that live there. But the real clownfish does not need adventure to be extraordinary. Its daily life is already filled with wonders. A fish that changes sex when circumstances require it. A fish that raises its young with devoted parental care. A fish that communicates through sound, navigates by smell, recognizes familiar surroundings, remembers its neighbors, and spends years protecting a single home among the swaying tentacles of a sea anemone. Sometimes the greatest discoveries are not found in rare or mysterious animals hidden from view. Sometimes they are waiting inside the creatures we think we already know. The more carefully scientists study clownfish, the more extraordinary they become. Every answer seems to uncover another question, another unexpected behavior, another reminder that even a fish no longer than a human hand contains millions of years of evolutionary history written into every part of its body. And perhaps that is one of the quiet lessons hidden beneath the surface of the reef. The natural world rewards patience. The longer we observe, the more details begin to appear. What first looked simple slowly reveals layer after layer of complexity, until an ordinary little fish becomes one of the most remarkable inhabitants of the tropical ocean. Unlike many reef fish, clownfish do not wander far from home. Once they have found a suitable sea anemone, they may spend nearly their entire lives within just a few meters of it. To us, that might seem like an unimaginably small world, but on a coral reef, every centimeter is filled with life. Tiny shrimp clean the rocks. Crabs search for food beneath coral branches. Feather stars slowly open their arms into the current. Small plankton drift past, carried by water that has crossed hundreds of kilometers of open ocean before finally reaching this quiet corner of the reef. For a clownfish, there is rarely any reason to travel farther. Food drifts close enough. Shelter is always nearby. Safety waits just a quick flick of the tail away among the gently swaying tentacles of its anemone. The relationship between the clownfish and the anemone is one of the most remarkable partnerships in the natural world. Scientists call this type of relationship mutualism because both animals benefit from living together. The clownfish receives protection. Most predators have learned that brushing against an anemone's tentacles is a painful mistake. The tiny stinging capsules hidden inside each tentacle fire in a fraction of a second, injecting venom that can immobilize small fish almost instantly. Few predators are willing to risk such an encounter simply for the chance of catching one small orange fish. The anemone also gains something valuable. As the clownfish swims constantly between the tentacles, it creates gentle currents that improve the circulation of oxygen-rich water around its host. The fish removes small parasites, chases away butterfly fish that sometimes nibble on anemone tentacles, and leaves behind nutrients that help feed the microscopic algae living inside the anemone's tissues. Neither partner is simply using the other. Together, they create a tiny ecosystem that has remained stable for millions of years. Even so, the beginning of this partnership is surprisingly delicate. When a young clownfish encounters an unfamiliar anemone for the first time, it cannot simply swim directly into the tentacles. Instead, it approaches with extraordinary caution. The fish gently brushes one small part of its body against a single tentacle before quickly pulling away. It waits for a moment, then repeats the movement. Again and again it makes these careful touches, each one lasting only an instant. This gradual introduction may continue for several hours. Researchers believe that during this slow process, the fish acquires chemical compounds from the anemone, while allowing the anemone to become accustomed to the fish's protective mucus. Eventually, something changes. The tentacles stop reacting aggressively, and the clownfish begins swimming freely among them, as though it has lived there forever. It is almost like watching two strangers slowly learn to trust one another. Once accepted, the clownfish rarely loses that protection. The anemone becomes its permanent home, its shelter during storms, its nursery for future generations, and even the place where it rests each night. Although the reef appears enormous to us, the clownfish knows every detail of the small territory surrounding its anemone. It learns the positions of nearby coral heads, the safest paths through narrow gaps in the reef, and the locations where tiny plankton are most likely to drift within reach. This detailed memory allows the fish to move with astonishing confidence through a space that, to human eyes, might seem chaotic. Scientists studying reef fish have found that clownfish possess surprisingly accurate spatial memory. Even after brief disturbances, they can return directly to their home without hesitation, weaving through a maze of coral branches as though following an invisible map. That ability becomes especially important whenever danger appears. If a predator approaches, the clownfish does not usually attempt a long escape. Instead, it races back toward the anemone with remarkable precision. Within seconds, it disappears among the waving tentacles, leaving the predator hovering outside, unwilling to follow. Sometimes the predator waits. Large groupers, moray eels, and other hunters have learned that patience occasionally succeeds where speed does not. They linger nearby, hoping the clownfish will eventually venture out again. Yet the fish rarely loses its composure. It simply remains tucked safely inside its living fortress until the danger has passed. Life on the reef rewards patience just as much as speed. As peaceful as their lives may seem, clownfish are never completely alone. A single sea anemone often shelters an entire family, each fish occupying its own place within a carefully maintained social order. At the very top is the largest fish of all, the dominant female. She is noticeably bigger than every other member of the group, and her size is no accident. Clownfish continue growing throughout their lives, so the oldest individual gradually becomes the largest. Just beneath her is the breeding male, slightly smaller but equally important to the survival of the family. Below them are several younger fish, arranged almost perfectly by size, from largest to smallest. What makes this hierarchy remarkable is how peaceful it usually is. The younger fish do not constantly compete for dominance. Instead, they remain deliberately smaller than the fish above them. Scientists have discovered that subordinate clownfish actually slow their own growth. By eating a little less and avoiding unnecessary conflict, they maintain the exact size difference needed to prevent fights within the group. It is an elegant solution. Every fish knows its place, and as long as the order remains intact, the entire family can live together with surprisingly little aggression. But life on the reef is never permanent. If the dominant female disappears, everything changes almost immediately. The breeding male begins one of the most extraordinary biological transformations found anywhere in the animal kingdom. Over the following weeks, his body starts to change. Hormones shift. His reproductive organs reorganize completely. Gradually, he becomes a fully functioning female. At the same time, the largest juvenile in the group grows rapidly and takes over the role of breeding male. No battles are fought. No rival claims the position by force. Instead, the entire social structure quietly rearranges itself, almost as though the family has been waiting for exactly this moment. This ability, known as sequential hermaphroditism, has fascinated marine biologists for decades. It allows clownfish communities to continue reproducing even after losing one of their most important members. In an environment where predators are always present, such flexibility greatly increases the chances that the family will survive for many generations. Long before scientists understood this process, divers simply noticed something curious. Whenever the largest fish disappeared, another one somehow seemed to take its place. Only careful research revealed that it was not a new fish arriving from somewhere else. It was the same fish, transformed. Nature often finds solutions that seem almost impossible until we look closely enough. The clownfish reminds us that survival is not always about being the strongest. Sometimes it is about being adaptable, patient, and ready to change when the world around you changes first. Although the dominant female receives much of the attention, the breeding male carries one of the most demanding responsibilities in the family. After the female lays her eggs on a carefully cleaned patch of rock beside the anemone, the male immediately fertilizes them and begins a period of constant care that lasts for more than a week. During this time, he rarely strays far from the nest. Again and again, he fans the eggs with gentle movements of his pectoral fins, creating a steady flow of fresh seawater across their surface. This simple action delivers oxygen to the developing embryos, while carrying away waste products that might otherwise accumulate. It is quiet, repetitive work, but without it, many of the eggs would never survive. The male also inspects the clutch continuously. If an egg has not developed properly or begins to grow fungus, he carefully removes it before the problem can spread to the healthy embryos nearby. It may seem harsh, yet this careful housekeeping protects the rest of the developing brood and greatly improves their chances of hatching successfully. As each day passes, remarkable changes take place inside the tiny eggs. What first appeared as hundreds of small orange spheres slowly becomes something far more recognizable. The embryos begin forming eyes, fins, and tails. Eventually, the silver shine of their developing eyes becomes visible through the transparent outer membrane, revealing that each tiny fish is almost ready to begin its own journey. The timing of hatching is remarkably precise. Most clownfish hatch shortly after sunset, often within a few days of a full moon. Scientists believe this timing is no coincidence. Darkness provides protection from many daytime predators, while the stronger tidal currents associated with the lunar cycle help carry the newly hatched larvae safely away from the reef. The moment they emerge, the tiny fish enter a completely different world. Only hours earlier they had been safely attached to a rock beneath the watchful care of their father. Now they become part of the open ocean, drifting among countless microscopic organisms in water that seems almost endless. At this stage, they look nothing like the brightly colored fish they will eventually become. Their bodies are nearly transparent, their fins are delicate, and their famous white stripes have not yet appeared. They are almost invisible against the blue water, an important advantage when nearly every larger animal sees them as potential food. For several weeks, these larvae drift with ocean currents while feeding on tiny plankton. Although they appear fragile, they are growing rapidly. Every day their muscles strengthen, their senses become sharper, and their swimming ability improves. What once seemed like passive drifting gradually becomes active navigation. For many years, scientists believed these tiny larvae simply floated wherever the currents carried them. Modern research has revealed a much more impressive story. As they mature, young clownfish begin detecting the chemical signature of coral reefs carried through the water. Every reef releases a unique mixture of natural compounds produced by coral, algae, seagrass, and countless marine organisms. The larvae are able to recognize these invisible scents and use them as guides while swimming toward suitable habitat. They are helped by another remarkable source of information. A healthy coral reef is far from silent. Beneath the surface, thousands of animals produce an endless chorus of tiny sounds. Snapping shrimp create sharp clicks that echo through the water. Grazing fish scrape coral with rhythmic movements. Countless other species contribute chirps, pops, and soft pulses that blend into a rich underwater soundscape. The young clownfish listens carefully. Researchers have shown that reef fish larvae can detect these sounds from surprising distances and actively swim toward them. Guided by smell and sound together, they slowly leave the open ocean behind until the outline of a coral reef finally appears below them. For a creature only a few weeks old, it is an extraordinary achievement. Without parents to guide them, and without ever having seen the reef before, they somehow find their way home using senses that humans can barely imagine. As the young clownfish approaches the reef, one final challenge remains. Finding coral is not enough. Finding the right sea anemone is what will determine whether the tiny fish survives its first days as a juvenile. There are more than 1,000 species of sea anemones in the world's oceans, yet clownfish form lasting partnerships with only a small number of them. Each clownfish species has its own preferences, and some will accept only one or two particular hosts. To the human eye, many anemones appear similar, but the young clownfish somehow distinguishes between them with remarkable accuracy. Scientists believe that chemical signals once again play a major role. The water surrounding each anemone carries a unique molecular signature, allowing the juvenile fish to identify a suitable home before making its careful approach. When it finally settles into its new anemone, another transformation begins almost immediately. Over the following weeks, the fish gradually develops the bright orange coloration and crisp white bands that have made clownfish famous throughout the world. Beneath the skin, specialized pigment cells create the rich orange color, while reflective cells known as iridophores form the brilliant white stripes. Thin layers of black pigment surrounding these stripes make the pattern appear even sharper, giving the fish its unmistakable appearance. Interestingly, not every clownfish looks exactly like the one most people imagine. There are nearly 30 recognized species of clownfish, and they display an impressive variety of colors and patterns. Some species are deep red. Others are almost completely black with narrow white stripes. A few display only a single stripe instead of 3, while others develop broad white patches across much of their bodies. Yet despite these differences, they all share the same remarkable way of life. Their entire existence revolves around the shelter of a sea anemone and the small family living within it. For many years, scientists assumed that clownfish were relatively simple animals whose daily routines rarely changed. But careful observation has revealed surprisingly sophisticated behavior. Each fish learns the exact boundaries of its territory. It remembers neighboring coral formations and recognizes familiar pathways through the reef. It quickly notices changes within its surroundings, whether a new predator has appeared, a coral branch has broken after a storm, or another fish has begun visiting nearby. Some studies even suggest that clownfish can distinguish between individual human divers. Marine researchers who regularly visit the same anemones have noticed that resident clownfish gradually become less defensive toward familiar people, while remaining cautious around strangers. Whether the fish recognizes facial features, body shape, swimming style, or some combination of visual cues remains uncertain, but the observations suggest a level of recognition that few people would expect from such a small reef fish. Like many intelligent animals, clownfish also display individual personalities. Some are naturally adventurous, venturing farther from their anemone in search of drifting food. Others remain cautious throughout their lives, rarely moving more than a short distance before returning to safety. These differences remain surprisingly consistent over time, suggesting that every clownfish experiences the world in its own slightly different way. This individuality becomes especially noticeable whenever something unfamiliar enters their territory. A curious shell carried by the current, an unusual shadow passing overhead, or a diver's camera drifting too close may trigger very different reactions depending on the personality of the fish. One individual might investigate immediately, while another disappears deep among the tentacles until the disturbance has passed. These small differences remind us that even within a single species, nature rarely creates identical individuals. Every clownfish carries its own history, its own experiences, and its own way of responding to the constantly changing world around it. Perhaps that is one reason people feel such a connection with these little fish. They are not simply colorful decorations drifting through coral gardens. They are attentive parents, careful neighbors, patient guardians of a tiny home that may shelter generation after generation beneath the gentle movement of the tropical sea. Over the past few decades, clownfish have become one of the most thoroughly studied reef fish in the world. Their bright colors first captured the attention of researchers, but it was their extraordinary biology that kept scientists returning to the reef year after year. With every new study, another unexpected detail seemed to emerge, revealing that this small fish was far more complex than anyone had imagined. One area that continues to fascinate marine biologists is communication. For a long time, people assumed fish lived in almost complete silence. Modern underwater microphones have revealed a very different picture. Coral reefs are filled with countless tiny sounds, and clownfish contribute their own distinctive voices to this underwater chorus. By rapidly grinding their teeth together, clownfish create soft clicking and chirping sounds. These noises may be quiet to human ears, but underwater, they travel efficiently through the surrounding water. Different situations produce different sounds. A dominant female defending her territory creates one pattern, while a subordinate fish signaling submission produces another. Even young fish begin learning these acoustic signals as they grow within the family group. Communication through sound allows the fish to avoid unnecessary conflict. Instead of fighting constantly, family members often settle disagreements through posture, movement, and gentle clicking. Serious battles are surprisingly uncommon because every fish already understands its place within the hierarchy. The clownfish also depends heavily on another remarkable sense: its sense of smell. To humans, the ocean may seem like a place where scents quickly disappear. In reality, seawater carries an astonishing amount of chemical information. Every coral colony, every seaweed, every predator, and every fish releases tiny molecules into the surrounding water. The clownfish constantly samples these invisible signals, building an incredibly detailed picture of its environment. Long before danger comes into view, the fish may already know it is nearby. Experiments have shown that clownfish react to the scent of predatory fish even when those predators remain completely hidden. As soon as those chemical signals drift into their territory, the clownfish becomes more cautious. It shortens its feeding trips, stays closer to the anemone, and remains alert until the invisible warning fades. This ability has protected countless generations of clownfish over millions of years. Their eyesight is equally impressive. Unlike humans, clownfish can detect ultraviolet light. The coral reef they see is therefore much richer than the world visible to us. Patterns hidden within coral, reflections on fish scales, and markings invisible to human eyes may all provide valuable information as they move through their environment. Researchers continue to discover new abilities that challenge our assumptions about fish intelligence. In laboratory experiments, clownfish have learned to solve simple puzzles, remember successful solutions, and adapt when conditions change. Rather than repeating the same behavior endlessly, they demonstrate flexibility, adjusting their actions based on previous experience. Some scientists have even explored whether clownfish recognize themselves in mirrors. The results remain controversial, and researchers continue to debate exactly what the experiments reveal. While there is no universal agreement, the very fact that clownfish became part of this discussion surprised many experts. Few people expected such a familiar reef fish to contribute to questions about animal awareness. Every year, these discoveries add another layer to our understanding. The clownfish is no longer viewed simply as a colorful resident of coral reefs. It has become a model species for studying social behavior, communication, development, sensory biology, and even the remarkable ability of some animals to change sex during their lifetime. Perhaps most remarkable of all is how much still remains unknown. Scientists continue investigating the chemistry that protects clownfish from anemone stings. They continue studying how larvae navigate enormous stretches of open ocean with such incredible accuracy. They continue asking how tiny brains process the complex sounds and chemical signals that surround every reef. Each answer leads naturally to another question, and that may be one of the most beautiful things about science. The closer we look at even the most familiar creatures, the more wonder we discover. A fish no longer than the palm of a hand becomes a doorway into evolution, ecology, chemistry, behavior, and millions of years of natural history, all hidden beneath the gentle movement of tropical waves. As the sun slowly sinks below the horizon, the reef begins another quiet transformation. The brilliant colors that filled the water during the day gradually soften into deep shades of blue. Shadows stretch across the coral. The constant activity of daytime fish begins to slow, while creatures that have remained hidden among the rocks prepare to emerge. For the clownfish, evening is not a time to travel. Instead, it settles deeper into the protective embrace of its sea anemone. The tentacles continue their gentle movement with each passing current, creating a living shelter that rocks almost like underwater grass in a soft breeze. Here, surrounded by familiar textures and familiar scents, the fish enters a state of rest. Fish do not close their eyes when they sleep because they have no eyelids. Instead, their bodies simply become quieter. Their movements slow. Their breathing becomes more regular. Their awareness of the outside world decreases, while they remain ready to react if danger suddenly appears. A sleeping clownfish is almost perfectly still, hidden among the swaying tentacles that have protected it since it first arrived as a tiny juvenile. Above the reef, the moon begins to rise. Its pale light reaches only the upper layers of the ocean, yet its influence extends far deeper than its light. The moon guides the tides, shapes the currents, and has quietly influenced the lives of clownfish for countless generations. Eggs hatch according to its rhythm. Tiny larvae begin their journeys beneath its light. Entire cycles of reef life unfold in harmony with movements taking place hundreds of thousands of kilometers away. It is remarkable to think that a fish only a few centimeters long is connected to something as immense as the moon. And yet nature is full of such invisible connections. The warm current flowing past the anemone may have begun its journey months earlier on the opposite side of the Pacific Ocean. The plankton drifting nearby may have grown from nutrients carried by rivers thousands of kilometers away. Even the oxygen dissolved in the surrounding water may have been released by microscopic algae floating near the ocean's surface earlier that very day. Nothing exists alone. Every small movement belongs to something larger, The clownfish depends upon its anemone. The anemone depends upon microscopic algae. The algae depend upon sunlight. The sunlight depends upon the steady burning of a star nearly 150 million kilometers away. Every thread connects to another. Perhaps that is one of the quietest lessons hidden beneath the waves. When we first notice a clownfish, we see a bright orange body marked with white stripes. After learning its story, we begin to see something very different. We see millions of years of evolution patiently shaping one extraordinary partnership. We see parents caring for eggs with remarkable devotion. We see tiny larvae navigating vast oceans using nothing more than scent, sound, and instinct. We see a family whose entire social structure can reorganize itself without conflict whenever circumstances change. And we see an animal that reminds us how much complexity can exist inside even the smallest forms of life. The more carefully we observe the natural world, the less ordinary it becomes. A familiar fish becomes a master navigator. A quiet reef becomes one of the busiest ecosystems on Earth. A simple sea anemone becomes both fortress and lifelong companion. Science has revealed many of these stories, but it has not reached the end of them. Even today, researchers continue returning to coral reefs around the world with new questions. How exactly does the anemone recognize its resident clownfish? How do larvae combine smell, sound, currents, and the Earth's magnetic field to find their way home? What other forms of communication exist beneath the surface that humans have not yet learned to hear? Each discovery reminds us that the ocean still holds countless mysteries waiting patiently beneath the waves. And perhaps, somewhere tonight, beneath warm tropical water illuminated only by moonlight, a tiny clownfish is resting safely among the gently swaying tentacles of its anemone, completely unaware that its ordinary life has become one of the most extraordinary stories science has ever told. Far beyond the coral reef, the open ocean stretches for thousands of kilometers in every direction. To us, it may appear empty, but beneath the surface, an endless journey is taking place. Every clownfish alive today began life as one tiny drifting larva carried by these enormous currents. Most never returned. Countless young fish become food for larger animals before they ever glimpse a reef. Only a very small number survive long enough to find a safe home. It is a reminder that nature does not promise certainty. It offers possibility. Every adult clownfish resting peacefully inside its anemone is the survivor of an extraordinary voyage that began long before it could even swim with confidence. For many years, scientists wondered how isolated clownfish populations remained connected across distant reefs. The answer lies within those drifting larvae. Ocean currents transport young clownfish over remarkable distances. Some settle only a few kilometers from where they hatched. Others may travel dozens or even hundreds of kilometers before discovering a suitable reef. In this way, reefs that seem completely separate are quietly linked together through generations of tiny travelers. Each new generation carries genetic diversity from one reef to another. Without these journeys, isolated populations would gradually become weaker over time. The ocean itself becomes the bridge that connects distant families. Researchers studying clownfish genetics have found evidence of these invisible connections. Fish living on reefs separated by vast stretches of water often share surprisingly close genetic relationships, revealing that somewhere in the past, tiny larvae successfully completed journeys that would seem impossible for such small creatures. These discoveries remind us that distance in the ocean means something very different than it does on land. Water is always moving. Currents constantly weave together places that appear separate on a map. For a larval clownfish, the ocean is not a barrier, it is a road. Yet those roads are beginning to change. As global temperatures slowly rise, coral reefs face increasing challenges. Even a small increase in average water temperature can place enormous stress on corals and sea anemones. During prolonged heat waves, both may lose the microscopic algae that help keep them alive, causing them to turn pale in a process known as bleaching. A bleached reef looks strangely quiet. The brilliant colors fade. The rich browns, greens, reds, and golds disappear beneath a ghostly white surface. Although the reef may still appear beautiful from a distance, it is under tremendous stress. For clownfish, this change affects far more than scenery. Their anemones also depend on microscopic algae. When an anemone bleaches, it provides less food, less energy, and often less protection for the family living among its tentacles. Researchers have observed that clownfish living in bleached anemones experience higher stress levels, produce fewer offspring, and sometimes abandon weakened hosts in search of healthier ones. Even more remarkably, scientists have discovered that clownfish may actually help their anemones recover. As they swim through the tentacles each day, they increase water circulation around the anemone, bringing fresh oxygen and nutrients that appear to support recovery after periods of environmental stress. Without realizing it, the clownfish is caring for the very home that protects it. It is another beautiful example of cooperation shaped by millions of years of evolution. Neither partner survives quite as well without the other, and perhaps that is why their relationship continues to fascinate scientists today. It is more than shelter, more than protection, more than simply living side by side. It is a partnership in the truest sense of the word, where the well-being of one life quietly supports the well-being of another, day after day, season after season, across generations beyond counting. Although clownfish spend most of their lives within a surprisingly small territory, their world is anything but repetitive. Every day the reef changes in subtle ways. Tiny crustaceans emerge from cracks in the coral, schools of fish drift past with the current, and soft corals slowly open their delicate polyps to feed. The clownfish notices these changes instinctively, adjusting its movements without ever needing to leave the safety of its anemone for long. Marine biologists have discovered that clownfish possess an excellent memory for the landscape surrounding their home. They learn the shapes of nearby corals, the position of rocks, and even the safest paths through the reef. If they are startled by a predator, they can return to their anemone with remarkable precision, often following exactly the same route each time. For such a small fish, this detailed mental map provides an enormous advantage, allowing it to react within seconds whenever danger appears. Strong tropical storms occasionally reshape entire sections of a coral reef. Branches of coral may snap, patches of sand are carried away by powerful waves, and familiar landmarks disappear beneath newly deposited rubble. Even after these dramatic events, many clownfish are able to relocate their homes and continue their lives almost as before. Their ability to adapt to gradual changes while remaining faithful to a single territory is one of the reasons they have survived on coral reefs for millions of years. Anyone who has spent time diving among coral reefs quickly notices another surprising characteristic of clownfish. Despite their modest size, they defend their homes with remarkable confidence. If another fish approaches too closely, the resident clownfish often swims directly toward the intruder, making quick charging movements until it retreats. Divers frequently experience this behavior themselves. A fish no longer than a human finger may repeatedly swim toward a camera or a hand, determined to protect its anemone and the family living within it. To us, this behavior can seem almost amusing, but from the clownfish's perspective, it is simply the natural responsibility of protecting everything that matters. Its partner, its developing eggs, and its shelter all exist within a single small patch of reef. Losing that home could mean losing its entire future. So even the smallest clownfish behaves with a confidence that seems far greater than its size would suggest. Life on the reef follows a calm and dependable rhythm. As daylight slowly fades and evening approaches once again, the clownfish returns to the familiar shelter of its anemone. The tentacles continue their gentle movement with every passing current, creating one of the safest places anywhere on the reef. Hidden among those softly waving arms, the fish settles into another peaceful night, completely unaware that its quiet, everyday life has become one of the most fascinating stories in all of marine biology. As darkness settles over the reef, the behavior of the clownfish begins to change almost imperceptibly. During the brightest hours of the day, it spends much of its time feeding, defending its territory, and caring for its home. But as the sunlight softens into shades of blue and the coral reef gradually quiets, the pace of life slows as well. The clownfish makes fewer journeys away from its anemone, choosing instead to remain close to the shelter that has protected it throughout its life. Unlike humans, clownfish have no eyelids, so they cannot close their eyes when they rest. Instead, they enter a quiet state of reduced activity. Their breathing becomes slower, their movements become gentle, and they remain nestled safely among the tentacles of their anemone, while the reef around them continues its endless rhythm. Scientists believe that this period of rest serves many of the same biological purposes as sleep in other animals, allowing the brain and body to recover before another day begins. Although the reef may appear peaceful after sunset, it is far from silent. Countless nocturnal creatures emerge from hiding as the daytime fish settle down. Tiny shrimp begin clicking from within the coral. Crabs cautiously leave their shelters to search for food. Small plankton drift upward through the water, beginning a nightly migration that takes place across every ocean on Earth. Even in complete darkness, life continues in every direction. The clownfish, however, rarely joins this nighttime activity. Remaining inside its anemone is almost always the safest choice. Many predators hunt more actively after sunset, relying on excellent night vision or an acute sense of smell to locate prey. By staying deep within the protective tentacles of its host, the clownfish greatly reduces the risk of becoming someone's evening meal. Researchers have also discovered that clownfish respond remarkably quickly to danger, even while resting. If a sudden movement disturbs the anemone or a predator approaches too closely, the fish can become fully alert within moments. Rather than swimming away in panic, it usually moves deeper into the tentacles, trusting the natural defenses that have protected countless generations before it. This partnership between clownfish and sea anemones has existed for millions of years. Over that immense span of time, both species have adapted to one another so completely that it is difficult to imagine either living quite the same way alone. The fish gains protection, while the anemone benefits from the presence of an energetic companion that helps keep its home clean, improves water circulation around its tentacles, and even provides nutrients through its waste. Nature is full of remarkable partnerships, but few are as elegant or as enduring as this one. Watching a clownfish disappear among the softly waving tentacles at the end of the day, it becomes easy to understand why this relationship has fascinated scientists for generations. What first appears to be a colorful little fish hiding inside a dangerous animal gradually reveals itself to be something far more extraordinary. A story of trust, adaptation, and millions of years of evolution quietly unfolding beneath the surface of the sea. To shrink in the most remarkable way, a young fish that once drifted across vast stretches of open ocean now measures its life in meters rather than miles. The currents that once carried it for weeks become little more than a gentle movement around its home. Every nearby coral branch, every smooth stone, every waving tentacle of the anemone becomes familiar through repetition. Scientists have observed that individual clownfish follow nearly identical routes each day, as though they have quietly memorized every corner of their tiny territory. Although their home range is small, their daily lives are surprisingly busy. Throughout the day, they leave the shelter of the anemone for short foraging trips, searching for tiny crustaceans, microscopic plankton drifting with the current, and small strands of algae growing on nearby rocks. Yet they almost never wander far. Even while feeding, they rarely lose sight of the protective tentacles waiting just behind them. To human eyes, this behavior can seem overly cautious. But on a coral reef, caution is often the difference between life and death. Predators may appear with almost no warning. A grouper may emerge silently from beneath an overhang. A moray eel may slide from a narrow crack in the reef. Larger fish patrol constantly, always searching for an opportunity. The clownfish survives not because it swims faster than these hunters, but because it knows exactly where safety is. The relationship between a clownfish and its anemone is often described as mutualism, meaning that both animals benefit. At first glance, it might seem that only the fish gains protection, while the anemone simply tolerates its unusual guest. But careful scientific observation has revealed something much more balanced. As clownfish move constantly among the tentacles, they increase the circulation of water around the anemone. Fresh seawater carries oxygen while washing away waste products that would otherwise accumulate. This gentle movement improves the conditions around the anemone's tissues and may even help it recover after periods of environmental stress. The fish also provide nutrients. Like every animal, clownfish produce waste, and that waste contains nitrogen and phosphorus. These nutrients become available to the anemone and to the microscopic algae living inside its tissues. In this way, the clownfish is quietly fertilizing the home that protects it. Researchers have even documented occasions when clownfish aggressively chased away butterfly fish, one of the few animals that regularly feed on anemones. The clownfish is tiny compared to its opponent, yet it repeatedly charges, nips, and harasses the intruder until it finally leaves. It is an impressive display of courage from a fish no longer than a human finger. For all their apparent boldness, clownfish are remarkably peaceful within their own families. The hierarchy inside an anemone remains stable for years. Each fish understands its position, and serious conflict is surprisingly rare. Instead of constant fighting, the group relies on subtle signals, body posture, sounds, and simple respect for established rank. The dominant female rarely needs to prove her authority. Her size alone communicates her position. The breeding male follows closely behind her in the hierarchy, while younger fish remain noticeably smaller. These smaller individuals do not compete directly because doing so would almost certainly end badly. Instead, they wait patiently, sometimes for years, until an opportunity naturally appears. This strategy may seem unusual, but it allows the group to remain remarkably stable. If the dominant female disappears, the breeding male begins the irreversible transformation into a female. The largest subordinate male then matures into the new breeding male. No outsider needs to arrive. No violent struggle is required. The next generation of leadership is already quietly waiting within the group. Few animals demonstrate such an elegant social system. Scientists often describe coral reefs as cities beneath the sea, and the comparison is surprisingly accurate. Every species performs its own role. Cleaner shrimp remove parasites from visiting fish. Parrotfish scrape algae from coral with powerful beaks. Sea cucumbers recycle nutrients by feeding on the sand. Tiny gobies guard burrows shared with shrimp that can barely see. Every creature contributes to the larger community. The clownfish is one small citizen among thousands. Yet, despite its modest size, it has become one of the most recognizable ambassadors of the entire reef ecosystem. Many marine biologists credit clownfish with inspiring public interest in coral reefs on a scale few other species have achieved. Countless people first became curious about marine biology after seeing a bright orange fish hiding among waving anemone tentacles. Sometimes the smallest creatures become the greatest storytellers. Perhaps that is because they remind us that extraordinary lives do not always unfold across great distances. A clownfish may spend its entire life within a space smaller than many human living rooms, and yet within that tiny world, it experiences partnership, competition, parenthood, danger, adaptation, and survival. Its story is no less remarkable because its world is small. As evening approaches over the reef, the pace of life gradually changes. The sunlight filtering through the surface softens into deeper shades of blue. Brilliant colors become muted. Day-active fish begin disappearing into cracks and crevices, while nocturnal animals slowly emerge from hiding. The reef never truly sleeps, but it changes shifts, much like a city as daylight gives way to night. Among the swaying tentacles of the anemone, the clownfish settles into its familiar resting place. The currents continue to move gently around it. Tiny particles drift silently through the water. Somewhere in the distance, shrimp continue their rhythmic clicking, creating the quiet soundtrack of the reef after sunset. For the clownfish, this place has been home since the day it first arrived as a tiny juvenile searching desperately for shelter. Now, every movement of the tentacles is familiar. Every current feels known. Every nearby coral head has become part of a landscape remembered through thousands of ordinary days. There is something quietly comforting about that kind of permanence. While the world beyond the reef continues to change, while storms pass overhead and seasons come and go. This little fish returns each evening to the same gentle refuge, surrounded by the same living tentacles that have protected it through every stage of its remarkable life. One of the reasons clownfish have fascinated scientists for so many years is that they seem to balance simplicity and complexity in equal measure. At first glance, their lives appear almost predictable. They spend nearly every day within sight of the same sea anemone. They defend the same small territory, and they rarely venture into the open water that surrounds the reef. But the longer researchers observe them, the more layers of behavior begin to emerge. What first looked like a simple reef fish gradually reveals itself to be an animal, making constant decisions about its environment, its family, and its future. Every morning begins much the same way. As sunlight filters through the surface of the ocean, the reef slowly comes alive. Corals expand their tiny feeding structures. Schools of fish begin moving between the coral heads, and countless microscopic organisms drift through the water with the current. The clownfish leaves the shelter of its anemone only briefly, never allowing the protective tentacles to disappear from view for very long. Small pieces of drifting plankton, tiny crustaceans, and bits of algae provide enough food to sustain it throughout the day. And the fish has learned exactly where these resources are most likely to appear. Researchers have noticed that clownfish often follow nearly identical routes while feeding. Instead of wandering randomly across the reef, they establish familiar paths that become part of their daily routine. These repeated journeys reduce unnecessary risk because every corner of the territory has already been explored. The fish knows where predators are most likely to hide, where currents are strongest, and where food can usually be found. To human observers, this routine might seem repetitive, but in nature, predictability often increases the chances of survival. This careful balance between exploration and caution is one of the defining characteristics of clownfish behavior. They are curious enough to investigate changes in their surroundings, yet cautious enough to retreat immediately whenever something unfamiliar appears. Marine biologists have observed clownfish approaching new objects placed near their anemones, sometimes circling them several times before deciding whether they represent danger. That willingness to gather information without taking unnecessary risks reflects a level of behavioral flexibility once thought to be unusual in such a small fish. Their ability to communicate also continues to surprise researchers. Although human ears can barely detect the quiet sounds produced beneath the water, clownfish regularly exchange clicks, pops, and short chirping noises during interactions with one another. These sounds are created by grinding the small teeth together and rapidly moving bones inside the throat. Different situations appear to produce different patterns of sound. Dominant fish use one type of signal when reinforcing their position within the group, while younger subordinate fish produce quieter sounds that seem to communicate submission rather than challenge. The reef may appear peaceful from above, but beneath the surface it is filled with thousands of quiet conversations taking place all at once. Vision plays an equally important role in their daily lives. The eyes of a clownfish are adapted to the colorful world of shallow tropical reefs, where sunlight penetrates the water with remarkable clarity. Scientists believe that clownfish can perceive ultraviolet wavelengths that humans cannot see, allowing them to notice patterns on coral, anemones, and even other fish that remain completely invisible to us. If we could briefly experience the reef through the eyes of a clownfish, it would probably appear richer, brighter, and filled with visual information beyond anything our own senses can detect. Even with these remarkable abilities, clownfish never become careless. A healthy reef contains countless predators waiting patiently for opportunities. Large groupers hide beneath ledges of coral. Moray eels remain concealed inside narrow crevices, and fast-moving jacks patrol the outer edges of the reef searching for smaller fish that venture too far from shelter. The clownfish survives not because it is the fastest swimmer or the strongest fighter, but because it understands its limits. Remaining close to its anemone has been a successful strategy for millions of years, and evolution has rewarded that caution again and again. Perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of clownfish life is how closely every stage is connected to the reef itself. Remove the coral, and the anemones begin to disappear. Remove the anemones, and the clownfish lose both their shelter and their nursery. Reduce the abundance of microscopic plankton, and fewer larvae survive their first weeks in the open ocean. Every piece of the ecosystem supports another piece, forming an intricate web of relationships that has developed over countless generations. The clownfish is only one small thread within that web, yet its story cannot be separated from the larger story of the reef. This is one of the reasons marine scientists pay such close attention to clownfish populations. Because these fish depend on healthy coral, healthy anemones, stable water temperatures, and clean ocean currents. Changes in their numbers often reveal changes occurring throughout the ecosystem. A thriving population of clownfish usually suggests that the surrounding reef is functioning well. When their numbers begin to decline, it often signals that something much larger is happening beneath the surface. Despite these challenges, there are many reasons for optimism. Around the world, marine protected areas have allowed damaged reefs to recover, and captive breeding programs have greatly reduced the need to collect clownfish from the wild for the aquarium trade. Researchers continue developing new techniques for restoring coral reefs, protecting vulnerable habitats, and understanding the complex relationships that allow reef ecosystems to flourish. Every new discovery helps build a clearer picture of how these extraordinary environments function and how they can be preserved for future generations. Perhaps that is one of the quiet messages hidden within the life of a clownfish. Even the smallest creatures can teach us something profound about resilience, cooperation, and the importance of living in balance with the world around them. Hidden among the gently swaying tentacles of a sea anemone is not simply a bright orange fish, but the result of millions of years of evolution refining one of nature's most remarkable partnerships. The longer we watch, the more we realize that the true wonder of the clownfish is not its famous appearance, but the quiet and beautifully ordered life it has been living beneath the waves all along. Thank you for spending this quiet evening with me here on Sleepy Depths. I hope this peaceful journey through the hidden world of clownfish helped your mind slow down and your thoughts drift gently away. As the reef grows quieter and the ocean settles into the calm of the night, imagine the little clownfish resting safely among the soft tentacles of its sea anemone, surrounded by the gentle rhythm of the sea. Let the sounds of the ocean fade into silence. Let your breathing become slow and effortless. Close your eyes. relax, and allow yourself to drift peacefully into a deep and restful sleep. Thank you for listening. Sleep well.